Well, here we are once again, back with Fork in the Road, where we talk to the leaders in sports, business and entertainment. And I have been wanting to speak to this man for a while because I have created something myself in the space that Jake works in the walks that we're doing. But a big welcome to Jake Edwards. Jake, how you going, mate?
Oh, thanks for having me, Corey. It's a really honour, mate. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and share this really important message, hopefully.
And you know what's funny, mate? I was, as a kid, I did actually barrack for Collingwood.
Yeah.
And I have a very long memory about players that played for Collingwood. I know who wore the number 8 for the Collingwood Football Club. It's the great Alan Edwards.
That's it, Butchie boy. Yeah, the big washed-up surfer as he is now. Most die-hard Collingwood fans, Corey, know who my old man is, and big centre forward there, number 8 for Collingwood Football Club.
He wasn't built for speed, your old man, was he?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't. He was more of a diesel, mate, as getting around the ground. But from what I can hear, I was unfortunate to get to obviously see him play, but he could take a mark. So I get told that many a times around all of his mates how good he was. And he tells me himself too, don't worry about that.
Yes, and unfortunately, and we'll cover later that of all the teams that you ended up going to was the Carlton Football Club, and that particular club, I know during that period, gave him and all Collingwood supporters a few nightmares of 1979. He played in he played in 3 losing grand finals, I think.
No, he was missed he had knee injuries. He's because he'd done his knee 3 times, so he missed 2, but he played in the one in 79 as well. And it turned out quite ironically because the Carlton Footy Club gave me number 37, which is Wayne Harms' number. And as you remember, he was the one who punched it in from the grandstands. The old man played in that game, so I found that quite funny, actually.
Was that someone of the powers that be at Carlton have a little bit? I think they're taking the piss a little bit with that, Jake.
I think you're right, mate. I think it was like a little bit of a last little swing, as it goes on. But whether it was deliberate or not, mate, I'm not sure. But it was quite funny, I found.
Yeah. And look, I suppose at the moment, look, I know we're going to have a chat about football and your career and what's all the roads that have led to outside the locker room. But obviously, with the business at the moment, it'd be a pretty busy period with a lot of people doing it tough.
Yeah, you're not wrong, Corey. It's a very challenging time for everyone in communities across Australia and here in Victoria, as we speak. We've just gone into lockdown for another 6 weeks. So it's adding further pressure to our people and our communities and sport. And generally speaking, sport, as you know, and your listeners and watchers would know, brings people together and that real connectedness to get away from career and, just have a bit of an outlet. And unfortunately here in Victoria, we don't have it anymore. And we're fortunate across the other states in Queensland and WA. We're doing a lot of great work still with sport where they're returning back to play. So we're excited to see that connectedness back with people and their families back into sport. But it is a real challenge, and we've seen our program, people reaching out more so over the last 3 months than we've ever had before.
Yeah. And look, as I mentioned, the journey that led for you to end up at Carlton, how did just take everyone through, because I'm not sure that everyone knows. Everyone knows now. It's quite interesting now, which is a great thing for you, that everyone knows you from outside the locker room. They actually forget that you did actually end up at the Carlton Footy Club, as we did mention.
Yeah, you're right. I guess it's as a footballer, mate, you'd know what it's like. You form that identity as a footballer, and when your career kind of finishes and that, you go on to do other things in life. And it is nice to be recognised now for the work that I do in the charity and mental health, which is really great. But I guess going right back to where it all began, I was actually the 5th player in my family to play VFL, AFL football. And my great-grandfather played over 100 games at the Bulldogs. My grandfather played over 100 games at the Bulldogs, a 54 premiership. My old man, as we've spoken about, and my cousin Shane O'Brien played at Collingwood, nearly 250 games. So there's a big history of footy in my family. In 2005, I was fortunate enough to get drafted to the Carlton Football Club as a bottom major, picked 36 that year, and Mark Murphy's year and Josh Kennedy to the football club. And then, mate, my career kicked off from there. Spent the first 2 years, just as any young bloke does, just working their backside off and trying to fit in and trying to belong. And I guess my story today is around mental health. And for me back then, as I'm sure through your experience with your career, there was nothing with mental health. I didn't know nothing about it. I didn't know what depression was. And I was going through it symptomatically during my career, and it was scary, Corey. Like I didn't kind of know who to talk to, or I didn't want to talk to anyone because I felt that I was weak or soft. I didn't want my teammates finding out that I was crying most mornings, and didn't want to be around people anymore because I thought the likes of Chris Judd and Favola and that I was playing alongside wouldn't accept me for a male in an industry of AFL. So I was diagnosed at the end of my third year with clinical depression, anxiety, and my career expanded one more year after that, which I found extremely challenging again, kind of, I guess, balancing that mental illness with my own personal life away from footy. But then football for me became a real outlet. So training and playing, I felt really, really good because I wasn't probably looking at my life outside. And then when I left the game after that fourth year, it hit me pretty hard. And that transition out of the game, as I mentioned before, the attachment with family, I felt like I let everyone down. And I only played 5 AFL games. So my ambition was to play 100 and many, many more years of football. And unfortunately, it didn't work out that way, mate. And then that transition out of footy was a very challenging one where I used alcohol and drugs as a way to suppress and deal with my emotions. And that just led me down a really difficult path. And unfortunately, mate, that led me to an attempt on my life one day. And off the back of that, I spent time in a program and rebuilding myself and learning about mental health and identifying the reasons behind my substance abuse. And then through that, I was able to rebuild myself, and that's where the charity now was set up nearly 6 years ago. So we've been doing that ever since.
How hard was it? And just thinking back, it's actually quite interesting that, and I'm not saying Dennis Pagan has any correlation between this. I'm definitely not saying that, but it's quite interesting that you and Wayne Swass both had Dennis Pagan as a coach, and I think that would have been pretty hard to actually go through, to have someone like Dennis that. Yeah, Dennis's heart is always in the right place, and he's a hard taskmaster. But to have someone in those situations to be able to go through that, it would have been interesting from your end, where you're trying to make it on the list.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I actually found Dennis quite good. I only had him for a couple of years, and then Ratton came in at the end of my second year. And then I found Dennis, he's the one who drafted me, so I'm forever grateful for that opportunity that wanted me at the club. But I think he just came from a generation of mould, as you know, Corey, where it was real that toughen up and get on with it. And Dennis was very much a chip off the old block, wasn't he? In the way he went about things and the way he kind of communicated to his playing group and his players. I found him and our one-on-one interactions were very good, actually, quite honest, and I appreciated that. I grew up in an environment with my old man who's very much old school, and those typical characteristics of harden up, stop being this and stop being weak and stuff like that. So I actually related to it quite a bit, but as you know, where we are today, mate, with AFL especially, the way we communicate to players and we wrap our arms around them a little bit more, it's certainly come a long way to what it was. And Dennis, was just a really kind of different approach to sport and coaching than it was even when Ratton had come in the way he approached his coaching as well.
And how hard, I know that obviously you had in the end, the diagnosis about what you were going through, but how hard, just take people through, how hard is it to, there is that mentality amongst everyone about, I've got to toughen up. The inner, the monkey mind chat that you're having with yourself must have been out of control. Were you having those conversations with yourself?
Yeah, I was, mate, every single day of my career up to that point. For example, most mornings I'd get up out of bed and I'd be sitting on the end of my bed and I'd have this real low and sadness and I'd be in tears, mate. And then what most blokes do generally, we respond through emotion, through anger and frustration. So I'd grab my bag and I'd throw it in the car and I'd drive off to the footy club. And then in that moment of kind of, I guess, as you said before, that mental chatter, why am I crying all the time, mate? Got to stop being a soft and harden up, mate, get on with it. And I just think to myself, this is what it must be like just to play footy, You've just got to deal with it, mate, and sort it out. This is all inside your head. And then 100 metres from the football club, I'd be on the side of the road and I'd have a breakdown, and have these anxiety attacks where I knew I was stepping into an environment where I had to be a certain way. And if I was to walk in how I'm looking and feeling right now, I was scared of the judgment and the rejection that I'd probably get from my playing group at the time. So it was a really frustrating period. And I remember walking into footy club training most mornings, putting a kind of a mask motion over my face and then having that kind of anchoring feeling, right, mate, you've got to be that toughness, that country kid who has that stigma around that stereotype of family football, I can play the game. I've got to present myself as that kind of, ego type of hard and edge type of footballer. So I didn't realize it at the time, mate, but I was actually doing a lot worse. I thought just getting on with things is just how you dealt with it. But I was actually just pushing it aside, and it just grew and manifested in other ways. During, no doubt, your career, especially into my career, what we would do generally well. And Carlton Footy Club at that time, mate, we weren't winning games of footy, so we weren't going well on the field. But we went we went pretty well off the field, So we partied pretty hard, and alcohol became a mechanism of coping and dealing with my feelings, which ultimately, as again, wasn't actually helping the issue at all. So yeah, it was a very difficult time of my life, and adding to the stress of I was in and out of the team at the time, so I was playing AFL footy, so I was playing in front of 80,000 people, and then I'd be high euphoric feelings of how good's this, and then going back home and then feeling nothing but loneliness and emptiness for 3-4 days a week at a time. It was just that roller coaster. And I'm 19 years of age at this time, 20 years of age, so extremely, extremely frustrating.
When did you first have the signs that you sensed yourself that, something's not right here? Obviously, like you said, the alcohol can mask it to a huge degree. Yep. But when did you start to think yourself, you go, hang on, I'm actually not right here. So
yeah,
first sense that.
It was during, looking back now in hindsight, there was clear evidence of signs probably the latter end of my second year at the football club. I had a severe injury where I dislocated my ankle, and that for me was probably a trigger, what we call in the industry like triggers. So things like relationships and finances and career can cause triggers in people's lives. For me, it was an injury, and you've been injured, mate. You know that environment, what it's like. It's isolated. You're away from everyone. And at the time, I felt like I'd kind of, and my career was up I didn't have a contract I'd signed at that time as well. And I started going through kind of issues around kind of those emotional roller coasters of up and downs. But I attached it to the injury and thought, this is just me not playing and being around the group. So there's very early signs with that. And then during my third year, as I was playing AFL football, I had that mental chatter again where I was playing AFL footy, and that was fun and happy and exciting. But then when I was at home, I was lost and I was lonely. And even though I had all these great things around me, I still felt really, really sad and really alone. So that for me, that third year was when I started questioning, hang on, there's a little bit more to this than actually me just going through life as it is, facing adversity. I'm actually feeling quite sad all the time when friends and family are, they're the ones thinking that I've got a perfect life. And I did externally. Playing footy, I just signed a good contract. I had good friends. I had a beautiful partner at the time. I bought a house. I had all these great things around me, but I didn't feel a sense of belonging or happiness anymore. And that was during that third year when I started thinking, geez, I'm actually, there's something more to this. But again, I did typical males, just kind of squashed it and said, nah, get on with it, mate. It'll sort itself out. Surely Juddy goes through this at times, and he's doing okay from what I can see. And I just got to work through this period of my life, and I can hopefully, get on to feeling better again. But it just didn't quite work out that way.
And was it sounds like it's a very similar story to Wayne Swoss, that we had no idea in terms of what was actually going on. And thankfully at the North Melbourne Footy Club, we had an unbelievable doctor in Harry Unlick that was, basically became Wayne's saviour. But a lot of the things that you're saying, I did do an interview with Wayne Swoss. The things that you're saying are very similar about, you have to, driving to training and all of a sudden have to pull over and you'd be in tears in the car, going to training and just putting on that brave face. Is it a similar story too from your own teammates that none of those guys had any inkling about what you were actually going through?
Yeah, it is actually, because I've had conversations. I've just done a little podcast the last probably 6 weeks called Delisted, and I've been focusing on those players from 0 to 50 games who didn't probably achieve success in the eyes of community of successful football. And I've spoken to the first kind of 6 episodes with my former teammates first, so the players from that 0 to 50 at that Carlton Football Club at the time, and we've had conversations around that, and all of them have told me, going, mate, I had no idea. Same thing with you with Schwatter. When I was in the club and around the boys, I was one of the boys, I was just trying to be that kind of fit in, banter, have some fun, go out, have a drink, carry on. Things would be normal. But away from the scene, mate, yeah, very similar to Wayne and what he went through. It was just about kind of going through my real hardship alone. But when I got to the football club, it was about, okay, I've got to be this person now, which, as again, it was doing a lot more damage than what I thought.
And before I forget, and I know it's probably something you might have actually said at the end, I think, Jake, what you've actually just mentioned about the support for players and athletes that come in and only have a short lifespan, having those conversations with them in terms of they have been successful. And I think too many guys would actually beat themselves up that I haven't played 200 games. I haven't you have all the dreams that you have as a kid about being a premiership player, all these different things. Is that what you find that you're trying to strip it back to, hey, you have been successful. You can use a lot of those life skills to move forward, that you have had the discipline, you know about structure, you know all about behaviours, that what it does to be successful.
Yeah, it's another great point you bring up, Corey. And as an athlete yourself, you've just mentioned what I call an athletic blueprint. Is when I come through my rehab phase, working with my psychiatrist, Dr. Brendan Murphy, he goes, me, mate, you know what? You've got actually great assets to contribute to any walks of life when it comes to getting a job here or working in everyday work. I'm like, what do you mean, mate? I don't know what you're talking about. Because I only knew how to pick a footy up, kick it, and move around. And he said, well, you know discipline, mate. You know routine. You know structure. You know how to work hard. These are all things that CEOs anywhere around Australia, the world, would hire people on that. So once he taught me around that blueprint of what I learned, the skills and being involved in a sporting club, especially an elite level, it's all about, achieving high level success and PBs and becoming as good as you possibly can. It really, I translated that into the development setup of the charity, which allowed me to really focus on something. And as you know, mate, us athletes, when we focus on something, it generally happens and expands. And sometimes those things aren't good things, so drugs, alcohol, etc. But when it's put into the right areas of purpose, the charity for me became quite easily to kind of grow in a sense, because I was committed to it. I knew what it took. I knew the effort was going to rely to make anything work. So it is. I look back, when I first left my footy career, I was devastated, mate. It was traumatic for me because I played 5 games. I was 95 short of what I thought. The narrative for me and the perception was that I failed. Who's going to want me anymore? I didn't know my identity anymore. And I felt like I let my family and friends down. But now I'm in a position, not just now, but the last 5 years, where I am really extremely proud of my career, only having played 5 games. But I played alongside some of the greatest footballers to play footy. Koutoufidis, Chris Judd, Favola. These are names that go down in history, and that's something I'm very proud of as well.
It's interesting you say that how athletes, and I remember, I think you might have even seen it, where Susie O'Neill, when they actually watched back, there was a race that they sprung watching this race. I think it might have been was it the Sydney Olympics or around there?
Yeah, it was.
You'd never ever watched the race. But even someone as great as Susie O'Neill, arguably one of our greatest athletes of all time and won multiple gold medals, how badly that made her upset that she'd let everyone down. And again, it's that ridiculous conversation that you have in your own head about you letting people down, rather than focusing on, hey, all the great stuff of how much preparation and sacrifice and discipline and all these things that by the time you've already gotten to that point, you've already been a success.
Yeah, and that's right. There's a reason why you get to the elite level, even as a young person, a teenager, you don't realise you're developing these great skills to set you up for longevity in work and life and relationships and whatever it might be. And that's one thing footy has really taught me. And there's a lot of great values that you learn through that. It's one of the things we try and invest to people through our program as well in community sport, around not taking for granted. And I think we're seeing now, as you mentioned off the top, around how you remove sport from people's lives, just kind of how lost people are feeling. Yeah. So that really important role that sport can play in the community, in our opinion, based on work that we do, is so important for people's mental health, not necessarily just physical health, but that support it does for people in their minds.
This episode is brought to you by National Make Good Solutions, experts in taking your commercial property back to the day it was built at the end of your lease. And look, it was a headline that I actually saw that was on the front page of the Australian, and as I mentioned off the top, it's probably what inspired me I don't know whether you've seen, I basically created a thing called Walk With Me. So in the morning, I actually saw a headline on the front page of the Australian, and we all knew the flow and effects of what was going to happen with the pandemic. That it basically said that the suicide toll was going to outstrip coronavirus. And does it frustrate you that we can have, and we're all respectful of how the measures that we're taking towards coronavirus and what that means to the community. Yep. But the same question I asked Wayne Swass, and the same thing that actually really, to be honest, pissed me off and why I did start these walks. Yep. Does it frustrate you that we can have such a reaction to coronavirus, but yet we can't do the same thing to suicide?
Oh, mate. It's absolutely the most frustrating thing. And I guess it's because maybe I'm in the industry 24/7 full time. So I do have an expansion of information that what I see. So give you an example, since January this year, here in Victoria alone, there's been 375 people in Victoria alone that have taken their lives by suicide. And if you match that up against statistics with, say, for example, you're using coronavirus, and yet the response to that, and the funding and the priorities that gets shifted into that is just a real it's a real eye-opener for us, but also, again, it's so frustrating because for many years we've been campaigning mental illness and suicide, still the leading cause of death in Australia, for young people. And it seems to be that, prioritising money and funding into these kind of support networks and resources for people, we're talking about it more than we've ever spoken about it before. So more people are attaching to mental health and seeing it in themselves, but we actually don't have what we see is not the right resources into the community so people who can go get help are getting the right help and long-term getting the supported help. So look, Suicide Prevention Australia are anticipating a 26% increase in suicide over the next couple of years off the back of this isolation period and the pandemic. So I really do hope government do sit up and listen and take note that what we're seeing now, yes, it's horrific with the virus, but this is really just the start of it. And the hidden, untold message right now is what we're seeing statistically, this is Victoria alone, is that people are taking their lives due to the isolation, financial stress, and it's just people aren't coping.
Yeah, no good. And look, that's, on a side note, that's what probably inspired me, like seeing guys like yourself and even Wayne Swass. It was a case in what I thought where I go, well, hang on, what can I do? What do I know? I'm not, have I got as much experience in the whole field like you or Wayne Swass? No, but what can I do? I can lead through action. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Go for a walk. You know what I mean? What habits can we learn? What can we teach them? And to tell you the truth, it's actually been unbelievably rewarding to go through the entire exercise. So now, just on another side note, I was talking to a little birdie, and it was Birdie. It was Dipper. Tells me that you're very passionate about your music and your music, your therapy around you that really helps you out.
Yeah, it does. He didn't give you an example of the music I listened to, did he?
No. Is it any surprises?
No, well, he does this real crappy example of what I listen to. But so you're right. So music for me is my therapy. It really is. It's my meditation, and it's something that I play instruments. So you can't see. I might just show you listeners here, but I've got my guitar here next to me at the office. I've got drums and stuff like that. So whenever I'm having a crappy day, and by the way, Corey, I still have mental illness, mate. I still have depression. I deal with it on a daily basis. I've learnt better coping mechanisms over a period of time that help me identify it early. And music for me is one of those strategies. So whenever I'm feeling a crappy day or I feel like I'm falling into moments of stress, anxiety, overwhelm, music for me is something I resort to pretty much straight away. And you can do that at any point. So on the phone, pick the guitar up, and I go for a run, I'm listening to it. So it just helps me really, I just bring things in perspective, helps me relate, and just calms me down. And a lot of people out there, music therapy is actually a thing. So it's therapeutic. And there are people out there as psychologists who do that. I'm actually getting involved with a side project called Sonic Minds, which is actually allowing people to do psychology support through writing music and listening to music. So I'm very passionate about it, mate. But the music I listen to is very much quite like metal, hardcore type of stuff. And Vipper does the worst impersonation of it.
Well, Dario, I did have a playlist during the 90s that had akin to Marilyn Manson and Metallica and those sorts of things. So tell me some of what's your go-to songs?
Oh, your listeners may have heard of a couple perhaps, but there's a band called the Amity Affliction, who is an Australian kind of punk hardcore band. And I'm fortunate enough to have grown a relationship with the members over the last few years. Their manager is actually my best mate. So, it's been easy for me to connect with a lot of those bands. But the Amity Affliction is my go-to band that I listen to. There's Parkway Drive. There's A Day to Remember. There's so many different bands that I do listen to. But for me, it's more artistically how difficult that stuff is to actually play. And put aside the screaming, which is what people can't get their head around. But the lyrical element to writing the music I listen to is so relatable to me in my life and what I'd gone through, because most of the artists have actually either had mental health challenges or substance abuse challenges. So it's more about feeling I can hear something that's speaking exactly, the life that I've lived. So, it's all music, mate. Pop, country, whatever it might be. I'm open to everything, but my go-to is generally that metal hardcore.
Now, you did mention, Jake, what are some of the tools in your kit bag? Because I know that, you know what I mean, the more tools you got in your kit bag that you can fall back on. I know music's one of them. What are some of the other things? And even for people out there, I've been really big on when we're trying to do the walks about, that's probably my go-to line. It's like, how can we give you more tools in your kit bag that in your structure and your routine? So what are some of the things that you do that have been really work for you?
Yeah, so when I talk to people and advocate mental health, man, I'll talk about really trying to keep it as simple and as focused and basic as possible. I feel that as people, we can take some further personal responsibility around, for example, I focus around things like, it might sound really kind of simple, but it really is. So sleep, ensuring that you're focusing on as good as sleep as you can get. Hydration. A lot of people, don't drink enough water every single day. If you want to make a real immediate impact on your mental health, trying to keep hydrated is really, really important. Food, nutrition, so eating good food at the right times. And all this stuff stemmed from probably being an athlete as well, which has rolled over into my life. And movement as well. After this, mate, we talk here. I'm going to put the runners on and go for a run around Albert Park Lake. Even though we're in lockdown now, it's no excuse not to get to the gym anymore. You can put the runners on, mate, and go for a run. So for me, it's about focusing on those real kind of key areas that you can really control. Other things are like, obviously, music. So I dedicate time actually to playing music and learning new music as well. Golf is another good hobby, mate, that I really, really enjoy. Obviously, the lockdown's made it complicated, but we can still play golf here in Victoria, which is exciting over the next 6 weeks. So I find that finding really good informal ways to hang around your mates is a really good environment too. So playing golf, as you know, you just talk about life and things and everything. And every time you leave the 18th hole, although your game of golf's pretty crappy probably, but you always leave feeling better about yourself. So I do put in things that are very clinical in the way of, they're not very complicated things, but they are very important elements that I think support my mental health. And music, golf, and spending time with my family, because I dedicate anywhere from 2 to 3 hours a week. I head back home to the farm and catch up with mum and dad, and just, it's a different environment. It's homely. I catch up with mum and dad who I don't see, all the time, and just seeing with them, mate, is really important to me as well.
And what do you suggest with that now? That's obviously for the next 6 weeks. What are some of the other things in terms of maintaining that connection? It's one thing that, again, when we've been doing these walks, that a lot of people have enjoyed is just the connection. We're not, touching one another or whatever. Obviously, because of social distancing and distance anyway, when we do the Zoom walks, but just that connection with people is such a big thing.
Yeah, it is. And one of the greatest things today is obviously, through technology and we can do FaceTime and that. So I encourage people to, it's going to be quite easy to fall back into really poor habits with lockdown. So if you're working from home, for example, you might tend to sleep in a little bit more, or you might stay up later at night, so you're not getting good enough sleep. So focusing on good routine and structure is going to be really, really pivotal over this next 6 weeks. And then when it comes to like connecting, really dedicating some time that you would actually pick the phone up, call a few mates during the day, or get on FaceTime. So, for example, this Saturday, I've already got like a Zoom call set up. There's 4 of our mates that we're going to call in, and we're going to have a couple of quiet beers together and watch the footy and just commentate it together. Even though we can't obviously be around each other as we'd prefer, but we can still have a bit of banter and a bit of fun. And yes, it's not ideal through technology, but at least you're still getting that kind of connecting this through technology, which again is what we're doing right now, mate. You're up in Mackay and I'm down here in Melbourne. We're having this great conversation. So you can do that through technology today, which is really, really important. Every Friday, mate, I dedicate about 2 hours a Friday just picking the phone up and calling all people involved in our program. So generally our sponsors and our stakeholders touching base, saying, g'day, how you going? Talking about footy, anything in life, just to keep that relationship kind of flow moving. So it is about dedicating that, but try not to fall back into behaviours where, like I said, you can sleep in, you can go to bed later, and that can really disengage your motivation to want to be around people. But getting outdoors as much as we can is really important too, because the sun creates, good chemical feelings in our body. So that's going to help obviously relate into being happier.
Will you enjoy that Albert Park Lake? Because I don't miss it. Worth to run where you can actually see where you're running all the way around the lake. I don't miss it.
No, well, we used to do Optus Oval there, around there, which is 3.2 kilometres. And that was about my peak, mate, about 3 kilometres. And then this one's 5 kilometres. So it's not fun. And
you always had, when you come around the back straight, you always had the bear that would jump on around the before you hit the home straight, and you'd be you could see the end, but it just got further and further away.
If you're anything like me, I was never an endurance. I got that from my father, I think. I was never an endurance athlete. I was more of a sprinter as such. But that was always hard work, mate, getting around Princes Park. And Pagan, early on, he'd make you do it, and then if you didn't get a good time, he'd make you run it again. So he wasn't short of of that kind of mentality of coaching, which is great. I like it.
Please tell me though that you beat home Fev. You got to.
Yeah. Well, it's not hard to do, to be honest with Fevy. To be honest, he did everything he could to get out of him. Don't worry about that. But there was a moment there, I reckon, 2008. 2008, where he was super fit, and I got asked a question yesterday, who's the best players I've played alongside? And honestly, Fevy is one of the best players that I've played with. At training, he was a freak. Game day, he was an absolute superstar. I was fortunate enough, mate, at one point, my first AFL game in the MCG against Richmond, round 1, 2008, there was me, Fev, Eddie Betts lined up in the deep forward there. So it's a pretty good, good team there.
Did you make Fev go stand in the pocket and you were full forward though?
Could you imagine that conversation? I think it'd be more like, mate, get out of me 50. That was probably more like Fevy. But he was actually a great teammate to play alongside. He educated and supported the young blokes quite well. He'd get frustrated if he didn't kick it to him, but that was the type of player he was. He demanded the footy, and that's why he was a superstar. And he's probably arguably one of the best full forwards, top 10 full forwards of our time.
Yeah, it would be. Now, speaking of someone else who is definitely not backwards in coming forward, talk about the great Dipper. Now, when I did, Dipper actually joined us on one of the walks the other week, and I didn't realise the great Dipper had such a huge involvement in getting outside the locker room off the ground.
Yeah, he's been instrumental, mate, and so pivotal, not only in the charity development, but also myself personally, just really helping me with opportunities and networking. And I think that's how you and I, mate, even met through the events with Sean Wallace and Dipper's involvement there, and obviously Greg Vales.
You better mention Greg as well.
Yeah, Mr. Vales, yeah.
Really pop it. So anyway, Greg, you've got to mention,
yeah, he'll tell you himself, mate, how good he is. But he's a star as well. I love him. He's one of my close mates, obviously. But Dipper, him and I met in Cambodia. We did a walk around Cambodia about 4 years ago now, maybe a bit longer actually. We did it for the Alana Madeline Foundation. We raised about $100,000 doing a trek around there. And I spent a lot of time with him walking, and we just spoke and talked about my journey and what I was doing. And then by the end of the trip, he come to me and said, mate, I want to be involved. I'm gonna step aside from the Alana Madeline Foundation. He'd been there for like 15 years. And he come on board with us as an ambassador for our program. And he's really opened some doors for us and really helped our program grow, which has been, pivotal. Because when you run a charity, mate, it's all about people and getting that message out there and really seeking that financial support, which he's been able to help with.
Yeah. Now we asked this question to all our guests, Jakey, that where would be the fork in the road moment for Jake Edwards that obviously you might have had a few and you could have gone either way, but what would you say has been the real fork in the road moment in your life that's ended up being for the positive?
Yeah, there's been a few, Corey. And the one thing that sticks out for me was a moment I was sitting in sitting in the office of my psychologist. Her name was Dr. Maddie Clement. She worked with the AFLPA as a psychologist. I worked with her during my AFL career a little bit. And it was off the back of my attempt. And about 2 days later, I was in her office. And I remember I was sitting across from her, and, mate, I was in a real bad place. I was shaking. I was crying. And I remember I had a really intimate, very personal conversation with her. She got her phone out. She put it on loudspeaker. She got my mum on the phone in front of me and had a conversation with my mum and basically said, look, we need to put Jake into a program. But before we do that, we want to make sure when he comes home, he's safe for a couple of days. And then off the back of that, she helped really get me in to see Dr. Brendan Murphy and worked at St. John of God in Dandenong and worked with him. And, for me, that was a real moment where I'd actually had worked with Maddie, and I had people sit me down right up before my attempt. Jake, you need to get help, mate. You're not right. But I just lied, Corey, and I just manipulated my way through that. And I wasn't ready. And then, unfortunately, I had to get to that point in my life where it was a real fork in the road moment for me, because I could have just abused it and probably lied my way and manipulated around it. But I actually said, nah, you've got to get help, mate. You got to get the right help. Where I invested my time and energy into doing what Brendan Murphy wanted me to do. And that saved my life. It's the one thing I'm extremely grateful for, is working with him. My family obviously were right behind me. And it was very rewarding, mate, to go down that positive path of that fork. And see the benefit that it made for me personally and the people around me. So, that could have went one or two ways looking back now, but I'm forever grateful that I went down that right path.
Yeah, 100%. Now, look, when it's all said and done, what do you want the legacy to be? Like, if you look back in many years' time, obviously we've got to get through. There's a tough period that's coming up, but what's the Jake Edwards legacy look like? And for what it's worth, it's starting to look like a real great body of work.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I appreciate that. It's something I think about all the time, actually. And the charity for me is something, it is forever. I want that to become my legacy. And I'm really proud to hear you off the top say that, I'm being recognised more for my work in mental health rather than generally speaking my name in that history with my family in football, because a lot of the time that's kind of what it has been. So for me, it's about, at some point, mate, over the next couple of years, I will step away from CEO running the charity, because we will need new energy and new people, and my experience is going to get capped, mate, at some point. So I want to make sure that when I step away in 10, 15 years, when this charity is running, hopefully bigger and stronger by then, that it's something I want to look back on, be extremely proud of, and my kids at that point can say, hey, be proud of them to tell them that this is what your dad did, and to set up a program like this. Because for me, mate, the program, the charity, is so much bigger than me. I'm a pioneer in terms of advocating for mental health, using my AFL experience to get that message out, as you are with your walk as well. But that can only go so far, Corey, So for me, it's about, at what point do you make that transition into a new opportunity, but leaving this behind and seeing it really sustain and grow is going to be what my legacy hopefully is all about, having started and founded it and leaving it in really good hands. And I want to be known for that person who really did challenge and push the conversation with mental health. And I think our generation, even leading into mine a little bit, mate, is that we were probably the guinea pigs quite a bit for what we see now is a better framework for mental health support for AFL players. Which is great work the AFL is doing in supporting the players and their families. But arguably 10 years ago, mate, there was nothing around. Like, I'm still waiting for the call from the AFLPA, mate. You know what I mean? And I'm still waiting for a call from the Bulldogs and the Carlton Football Club just to check in on me and see how I'm going. But that's something that you get really bitter about when you leave the game for a few years. And then you realise that, that you got to grow up, and, at the end of the day, everyone's just trying to do their best. So, today, that stuff wouldn't happen. And if it means that we had to go through what we had to go through, so Wayne and myself and Nathan Thompson and, Boydie and Dane Beams and all these blokes who have come out of the game recently for us to get better moving forward, then for me as a legacy, that could be something I could be extremely proud of.
I was going to ask, one other question that we ask is someone to nominate their favourite photo that also means a lot to them.
There's a couple that come to mind now, and I'm sure if I think about the next couple of days, I'll be like, oh, geez, I should have picked that one. But there's the one that comes to my mind now that sticks into my head was actually after I kicked my first goal in the AFL. There's a little toe tap across the line, and there's a photo of about 3 seconds after of Fev and Eddie jumping all over me on the MCG after I kicked my first goal. So that's something that I have around me all the time. That's at home. It's on my desktop here as well. And it just reminds me, because I did leave the game, mate, quite bitter because of what I'd gone through. And I lacked some responsibility because of that. And that reminds me of that kind of perspective on my career. And, hey, mate, you got to be super proud of what you did. No one I know walking in and out of this office has done that.
Well, Jake, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit down. I think the work that you're doing in the space was already fantastic. The work that you guys like yourself and Wayne Swoss unbelievably needed in the community at the moment. I know that, like I said, if I can in some way, some small part with even the walks that we're doing, if it helps through actions, more than, it's just only a small part of what I can do. But the work that you guys have done, you've been absolute pioneers. I know on behalf of everyone that is listening out there, a lot of the advice I've said today, especially for the Victorians out there going through a tough time, well, you've got no one better to listen to that's come through the other side, just through some tips and things you can do. On behalf of everyone, mate, and our sponsors, National Make Good Solutions, a huge thank you. It's great to sit down and have a chat, and have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks, Corey. We appreciate it, mate. Thanks to your sponsors too, mate, for making this happen. And yeah, you're already doing more, mate, than probably what you probably take credit for yourself. So thanks for having me on, sharing the message, a really important one. And for anyone watching who's involved in sport, just jump on our Facebook and our website, which is otlr.org.au, and you can find us on our socials if you want more information.
Perfect. You even got in the little bit that I was actually going to say, where can you find you? But absolute pleasure, mate. And let's hope that it's as good a period as we can hope for in the next little bit. And best of luck to everyone out there, and best of luck to you, mate.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.